Scriptures. See, I've set before you today life and prosperity, death and adversity. If you obey the commandments of the Lord your God that I am commanding you today, by loving the Lord your God, walking in his ways, and observing his commandments, decrees, and ordinances, then you shall live and become numerous, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land that you are entering to possess. But if your heart turns away, and you do not hear, but are led astray to bow down to other gods and serve them, I declare to you today that you shall certainly perish. You shall not live in the land that you are crossing Jordan to enter and possess. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curses. Choose life so that you and your descendants may live, loving the Lord your God, obeying him and holding fast to him. For that means life to you in length of days, so that you may live in the land that the Lord swore to give to your ancestors, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. This is the word of the Lord.
Wilshire was going around trying to find inspiration for a poem. Now, Shire has been well known for writing lyrics for Beyonce and other musicians, but she has become famous for her poem, Home. And the ways that she came about this poem was not that she just sat at her desk one day and began to jot down thoughts or things that she saw on the news, but she wanted the real life experience, the real understanding of what it is that refugees and immigrants have to do when fleeing from home. So in 2009, she went to an abandoned Somali embassy in Rome. And this building had been turned into a home for many refugees and immigrants. And as she walked in, she looked around and saw so many people laying on top of each other, scrunched together in small spaces. And the first thing she asked someone was, "How did you get here?" And they responded, "Can't you see? Can't you see it on our bodies? The Libyan desert red, the Gulf of Aden, the city of Rome. We are hoping that the journey meant more than the miles." The passage before us in Deuteronomy embodies a story of refugees journeying with God. A story of immigrants praying and hoping the journey has more meaning than the miles that they have walked and walked and walked. And the book of Deuteronomy is known as Moses' final will and testament to the people. And just imagine Moses is standing before these people, sharing these words to them. And he sees in their eyes and he sees upon their body the scars, the welts, displaying their time in Egypt. The place that they thought was home, the place their ancestor Joseph rose to power and made a great nation. He sees upon them, the notice is the sand from walking through the Red Sea, still in the crevices of their body. He sees the wrinkles on their faces from the tired walking over and over in the wilderness. And he hears over and over the grievances. When will Yahweh give us a place? When will the promises stand? When will we find a home? Why can't we just be like other nations? And for years, Moses has been leading these people. He has noticed their good and bad habits. He knows the ways they're going to make decisions. He knows they're going to break the rules often. And because Moses knows them, he just says, before you this day are choices. Before you this day, it's life and death. blessing and curses. Before you this day is good and evil. Choose. But I must warn you, because I have walked this line with you, because I've known you for so long, I know there are times you're going to disobey. I know there are going to times that you're going to choose death rather than life, evil rather than good, curses rather than blessing. But choose life. Now, there's a few things that make this passage unique but also difficult. First, I urge you not to read into this passage as prosperity gospel. The text is not suggesting that by choosing to love and obey God, that you're going to get material gain and success. That's not blessing. The premise of blessing is living out the ordinances of God. And by doing that, by upholding these values of God and living in the way God has called us into the future of fullness and possibilities, we then have an abundant relationship with God. That is blessing. A relationship that carries us into what God envisions for our lives and has called us into. That is blessing. And while Deuteronomy sets this text at the end of the wilderness period, most historians point out that this text was actually given to those sitting in the Babylonian exile. But in either case or placement, the Israelites find themselves at an uncertain point about their future. And so Moses is giving words that bring certainty in the midst of this. How they respond to God, how they respond to God's love, how they respond to life, how they respond to good, how they respond shapes the nature of their future. This making decision, though, isn't just a one-all, but it is the continuous decision-making, the choosing throughout their journey with God that will make a difference. And it seems that this passage today is not just for these individuals, these Israelites, or it's not just for those who are fleeing home, not just for refugees and immigrants, but it is also for those who sit and have watched, for those who sit in comfortable seats, for those who have never had to experience before. The story, the words of choice of life is for all of us, requiring us to understand that our choices make a difference. In the winter of 1993, Professor Miroslav Volf was giving a lecture. He was giving this lecture about embracing enemies and embracing the other. And one of his friends, Jürgen Moltmann, stood up and said, "Can you embrace the Setnik?" Now, the Setnik were notorious Serbian fighters who were causing desolation in Wolf's home country in Croatia. They were herding people into concentration camps, brutalizing women, burning down churches, and destroying cities. And for him, the Setnik was the ultimate other. And in his book, Exclusion and Embrace, he sits and says that I wrestled with two things. And one point, I just hated them for who they were and what they had did to my family and what they were continuing to do to those that I love. But on the other side of this, my faith in God has told me that I have to learn to love them. And what do I do when my faith is different from the values and the things that I hold. And so his answer to Jürgen Moltmann was no. No, I can't embrace them or forgive them on my own. But because of my faith in God, because of my faith and my calling and the answer to my call, my answer has to be yes, because it was the decision that I made when choosing to follow Christ, that I would follow in love, follow in life, follow in accepting another who I might not like. Choices were already made for me when I went to the waters of baptism. And that's the thing we must remember. Our core identity is not to belong to any nation, but our core identity is within God. Our loyalty and allegiances aren't back and forth to people, but to God, because when we stepped into the waters of baptism, when we said, yes, I will follow, here I am, choices were already made. And that's hard. We won't act like that's easy. Faith has never been easy, nor has it ever been written in any text that choosing to walk with God is easy. Nowhere has it ever been said, once I walk down the aisle to some song that is sang during the time that when I say yes to that everything is easy and I don't have to do anything else. Never has that been said. Faith is hard, and choosing life is not easy. But Moses says to these people, this is what is required and asked of you. Before us this day are choices, my friends. And you may think that your decisions do not play a role in this world, but they do. See, John Claypool said that the law of love is that what happens to you makes a difference to me. Or let me put it in other words that some of y'all might know. As Lizzo says, when I look at you, I see me. So I do unto you as I would do someone living in my two-story. We got different stories, we under one roof, so when it spring a leak, we got work to do. And that lies at the heart of all we do. When we live out that truth, we discover this one. What happens to you and another makes a difference to God. And when we practice that, we have a different world before us. The world. On Monday, a 7.8 magnitude earthquake, followed by multiple aftershocks, called widespread destruction, affecting Syrian, Turkish, and Kurdish communities. And just this morning at 8 a.m., the death toll rose to over 33,000 people. Still finding more bodies under the rubble. Toppling over 730 buildings and damaging thousands of territories around. And with nowhere to go, tents have been placed outside in freezing cold weather. Strangers huddled up together just to keep warm, to stay alive. And while we sit here in this place 6,600 miles away from where the earthquake took place, I pray that we will not be so removed from what the experiences of others that we turn away and just go on about our lives as if it's an impossible grasp to help. But I hope that we would recognize that the experiences of others are experiences of those who are deeply loved by God. And because of that, what happens to the Syrian and Turkish and Kurdish people matters to God and matters to us, and how we also equip and work right here to help. Now, among the over 33,000 deaths was the Hadia family. The family was among millions of Syrians who fled the rebel-held territory in 2018. Abu and her husband, Abdullah, and their 4 children tried to rush out of the building as they felt it crumbling down. And they did not make it. Right as they were at the exit, they did not make it. And as residents were grabbing the rubble in the search party, finding people, they began to think that they heard something. And so they began to dig faster and faster and faster. And they weren't crazy that they began to hear cries of an infant. And that's what they found. They found underneath the rubble and devastation a newborn girl, still attached by the umbilical cord to her mother, still receiving physical and emotional attachment, still receiving nutrients in order to stay alive at all. And this newborn baby had arrived in this world that was crumbling around her by the strength of her mother. Seems like a last gift that her child may be just be allowed a chance coming into this world, just as the residents heard the screams and the cries of this infant, that the choice of the residents pursuing this, the choice of the residents to find, the choice of them to find life around them led to a future of new possibilities. There is a visceral and instinctive temptation for us to turn away from making difficult choices. That when the rubble is all around in our lives, that we seem as if it's an impossible grasp. Before us today are choices, my friends. And how we will choose to answer the God who calls us amidst anything will determine how we get a glimpse of the fullness and the possibilities of the world God calls us to live into. Amen.